Welcome to this explainer. We're jumping right into the invisible architecture of the global economy today. We're talking about a massive, completely unannounced software update that's happening to the international financial system right under our noses. Often the absolute biggest shifts in the world happen completely out of sight. Well, we're going to expose one of those shifts today, looking directly at the data and the mechanics behind the whole shebang. So let's just dive right in.
$300 billion. Let that number sink in for a second. In 2022, the United States used its financial superpower to do something totally unprecedented. Literally, with the flip of a switch, they froze roughly $300 billion of another country's sovereign assets. Now, while this was covered everywhere as a major geopolitical move, behind closed doors, central banks around the world were absolutely terrified. Why? Well, they realized that if a whole nation's bank account could just be zeroed out overnight, it could theoretically happen to anyone.
And man, that realization triggered a silent panic. Right now, the mainstream media is hyper-focused on inflation, AI stocks, and, whether interest rates are going to be cut. But get this, global reserves of the US dollar just hit their lowest level since 1992. The world is quietly rewiring itself. So the really crucial takeaway here is that while everyone is distracted by the daily news cycle, the fundamental plumbing of global wealth is actually being rerouted.
Section 1. America's exorbitant financial privilege. Okay, to truly understand why central banks are taking this so seriously, we first need to look at the invisible engine behind the U.S. economy, the global reserve currency status established right after World War II.
The sheer scale of the advantage this creates is just staggering, because other countries are basically forced to use dollars to settle trade, buy oil, or pay debts. America gets access to the cheapest capital on Earth. This status saves the United States an estimated $200 billion every single year. It's essentially the greatest financial cheat code in human history.
Let's actually look at the mechanics of everyday global commerce. Imagine the Central Bank of Brazil wants to settle a massive trade with China. Neither country has any direct connection to the United States for this specific deal. But because there aren't really any highly liquid alternative markets for these transactions, they're forced into step 2, routing that trade through a correspondent bank in New York, like JP Morgan or Citi. Think of a correspondent bank as a mandatory financial toll booth, a necessary middleman handling the currency exchange because the two local banks don't have a direct relationship. And finally, step 3, the trade has to be settled in US dollars.
And this brilliantly illustrates what economists actually call America's exorbitant privilege. This system wasn't just built to empower global trade, it acts as an infrastructure built on 3 really distinct pillars. First up, intelligence. When that Brazil-China trade clears through New York, the US gets this massive bird's-eye view over global trade data. Second, investment. Because countries need dollars to trade, they're essentially forced to buy US Treasury bonds, which funds US debt at artificially low rates. And third, jurisdiction. Running everything through New York enables the US to act as the supreme regulator of the world.
Section 2. The hidden mechanics of control. This brings us right back to our catalyst in 2022, where the unwritten rules of global finance were completely rewritten.
The actual mechanism used was SWIFT. Essentially, think of it as the WhatsApp for international banking. SWIFT is the primary secure messaging network banks use to talk to each other globally. By cutting Russia off from SWIFT, the United States sent a massive, undeniable signal to every central bank on Earth. The financial system you depend on for your nation's survival? Yeah, it could be switched off at any moment.
Suddenly, countries started looking at their dollar holdings with a whole new sense of vulnerability. They realized that to protect themselves from American jurisdiction and the threat of being disconnected, they needed to coordinate a massive effort to build entirely new infrastructure. But replacing the global financial pipes isn't something you can just do over a weekend. It requires a seriously coordinated global effort.
Speaking of highly coordinated effort, before we discuss the dollar's backup plan and who's building it, let's look at how you can coordinate your own research. GenSpark is an AI workspace that coordinates complex information by replacing 10 different AI subscriptions with one single platform. When you want to research massive topics like macroeconomic shifts, GenSpark's cloud computer pulls data across dozens of sources and builds instant, professional, structured reports while you literally step away from your desk. You can find a link below for free credits to try it out. Okay, let's get back to the changing world order.
Section 3. Building the BRICS backup plan. Let's examine who is actively creating the infrastructure to operate completely outside of America's rules.
The answer? The BRICS coalition, and it's evolved way beyond its original members. In 2024, they expanded to include major economic and energy heavyweights like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Iran, and Egypt. This newly expanded coalition now represents over a quarter of the entire global economy. They've got the mass, and now they're actively building the tools.
Which brings us to a fascinating and honestly highly underreported development: the Unit. This is a blockchain-based settlement tool designed specifically for these nations. It acts as a neutral measuring stick backed 40% by physical gold and 60% by a basket of BRICS currencies. Its explicit design and ultimate goal is to completely bypass the US dollar's monopoly on pricing global commodities. By anchoring this digital unit partially to physical gold, they're creating a system of intrinsic value that just doesn't rely on the monetary policy of the Federal Reserve.
But remember, a new currency or settlement unit needs new pipes to travel through. Enter mBridge. Launched in 2024, mBridge is a cross-border payment platform that allows countries to execute direct trade settlements using central bank digital currencies. This fundamentally changes the game. It means trades can happen directly between nations with absolutely zero correspondent banks. No JP Morgan, no New York watching over the transactions. It's a direct peer-to-peer system for sovereign nations. That mandatory financial toll booth we talked about earlier, mBridge removes it completely.
Section 4. The end of the monopoly. If trade successfully starts settling through these alternative systems at scale, the decades-long systematic advantage the United States has relied upon could completely disappear.
And we're already seeing the cracks forming in real time. Central banks are currently hoarding physical gold at the fastest pace in modern history. We're seeing India buying UA oil and settling the trade in rupees. We're seeing Saudi Arabia openly discussing accepting Chinese yuan for oil sales. These are direct, observable actions that completely undermine the 50-year-old petrodollar system.
Consider this reality. The dollar's monopoly wasn't built because everyone loved it. It was built because there were no other options. While these individual events, like India using rupees for one oil shipment, won't kill the dollar tomorrow, together they signify a monumental paradigm shift. Because for the very first time in over 80 years, real, functional alternatives finally exist.
You're probably not going to hear about this quiet rewiring on traditional financial media, mostly because nuanced topics like cross-border payment rails just don't get the same clicks as the daily stock market drama. But this is the invisible architecture that actually runs the world. If you want to understand the structural mechanics actually moving the markets, subscribe for more of our explainers. And as you go about your week, I'll leave you with this. Are you watching the loud threats on the news or the ones hiding right in front of you in plain sight?